weird. Yes, you did. Made it weird. What's happening, weirdos? This is the incredible return of the incredible David Nichtern, who is a great teacher of mine, a great friend of mine, a wonderful Buddhist, and a very wise and funny person. And I'm so glad you guys are here to check him out. If you want more David Nichtern after you listen to this, and chances are you might, you very well might, go to dharmamoon.com. That's his organization, DHARMAMOON.com, dharmamoon.com, and you will see a link there for their 100-hour mindfulness meditation teacher training with David Nichtern. Val has done it. It's incredible. He's incredible. You're about to hear, hopefully you heard the first chat. If you didn't, David and I met at the Ram Dass retreat in Maui, and we had breakfast together, and we ended up talking so long, we ended up having lunch together at the same table, because he's just a wealth of information and just a calming, wonderful presence in my life, and I'm happy to share that with you guys today. Not much to plug up top other than dharmamoon.com. I do want to say I'll be on the road when this comes out. I'm actually today heading to St. Louis. So go to peteholmes.com if you want to see me in St. Louis. See you in St. Louis. And then the weekend after that, I'll be in Salt Lake City. There's more dates being added. If you just saw me, I'm doing a new hour. I'm taking a new hour out, and I'm so thrilled with it, and it is so fun. So I'll be adding even more dates for the tour. We're calling it the Feeling It Tour. This is the tail end of the Where Were We tour for St. Louis and Salt Lake City. But all those dates will be at peteholmes.com. Check it out. Hope to see you on the road. Always means a lot. And go to largo-la.com for my monthly show in Los Angeles. The last one was so fun. Kumail was on it. It was so cool. Check that out. It's once a month, largo-la.com. There's definitely one in October. I'm just blanking. It's on a weekend, I'm sure. A weekend in October, largo-la.com. And we're brought to you by our friends today at ONNIT. Alpha Brain, I was just packing my bag to go on the road. Alpha Brain is such a huge, huge part of my life. Actually, I did a show at Dynasty Typewriter last night, and someone had me autograph their Alpha Brain bottle, which I thought was hilarious and wonderful. And they knew I would appreciate that. I just packed up. I was putting my Alpha Brain Black Label in the bag. It's a tight bag. I travel with one backpack. Not a lot of room in there, but I never don't travel pretty much anywhere without Alpha Brain. It's in my car, it's in my travel bag, it's in the pockets of my jackets. What is it? It's a nootropic. What's that? It's earth-grown ingredients that help you concentrate, help you focus, help you dial in. It helps your brain work. It's not a stimulant. It's not like caffeine. It doesn't get you jittery. It doesn't get you wired. It gets you in that flow. If you need to concentrate, if you need to answer emails, if you need to write a script, if you need to do stand-up, if you need to do a podcast, or if you just need your brain functioning clearly and well, Alpha Brain 15-20 minutes before you do that task makes a huge noticeable difference. It is a game changer in my life. I wish I knew about it in college. I'm so glad I know about it now. Give it a try. Support your brain, and you'll be supporting this show. Go to ONNIT, ONNIT.com/weird. You'll get 10% off everything you see on that landing page. And those sales help support the show, helps keep the lights on here. We appreciate that. It'll keep your lights on. Keep your brain running smooth. I take it constantly before every show, before I sit down at my desk. ONNIT, Alpha Brain, ONNIT.com/weird. All right, everybody. Hope to see you in St. Louis. Hope to see you in Salt Lake City. Enjoy David Nichtern. Go to dharmamoon.com. Get meditation, mindfulness training from the man. He's incredible. Get into it.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Wow. Seamless.
Yeah, seemingly seamless.
Seemingly seamless. Same root. What is that? Yeah. Seamless. No, it's not. It's SEAM. Shit. The second one is seem.
Yeah, there's two different things, but they both have to do with apparent reality.
Seems make it look like two things are attached that aren't. So seems make it seem is what you're saying.
As if it's seamless.
And we're off, baby. Mickey,
Oh,
I'm so happy to see you. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
yeah.
This is the welcome. I'm just saying I'm so thrilled
Yeah.
to have a little time with you. It's one of the great joys of my life that this podcast provides these excuses to
Yeah.
hang out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it didn't even exist like 10 years ago, right?
I know, and I think people would say that, oh, that's when we were in coffee shops and talking. And I'm like, I don't think so. I think we're talking more now than ever. I think all of these things that are internet, whatever, supposedly driving us apart are actually doing the opposite. I think I'm talking way more to people than I ever have.
Well, yeah. And it's a certain aspect of communication is heightened by it, don't you think? Haven't you found that?
That's the whole thing. We're cooking over a spit right now. The flame of urgency. Well, you know, Val and I do the Friday episodes, and I'm like, it's one of the keys to a healthy relationship is having nice long conversations once a week. But I would add to that, if you record them and you release them, there's an urgency. So why do you go to a date? Why do you wear a suit? Why do you go to a white tablecloth restaurant? It's to add a little performance to it, meaning it's not just for show people. Valentine's Day is an open mic for regular folks. You go out and you do a song and dance. Look at what we're wearing. Look at how we're behaving. How much are we laughing? How much are we touching? All that sort of stuff doesn't make it false or wrong, but human beings tend to do better when other human beings are observing them. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and there's also rousing something,
Yes.
which is probably the essence of decorum and things like that, where you create not a superficial outer shell, but a kind of level of expression that's related to how others are connecting with you.
Yes.
It's not this kind of hyper casual and clueless kind of vibe. It's like
That's right.
the stage is set, the table is set.
And that's our whole look. When I was a kid, I went through a real Holden Caulfield period where I was like, oh, grown-ups are so phony and they talk. You know what I mean? I do hate when people talk like they're on a conference call, even though they're not on a conference call. You know what I mean? They're like, well, that's great, Jim. Like we're in line at a coffee and they're like, well, yeah, let's circle back to that. And, you know, let me jump off here. I'm going to talk. I'm like, why are you talking? Because you've been so corporatized that you can't even talk to me as a person.
Yeah.
I hate that. So it can be perverted and taken to an extreme.
Right.
But there's something fun. It's a wedding. It's going to a court to contest a ticket. There's a drama to it. There's a judge, there's pillars, there's marble, even you know, firefighters and EMTs. We created all of this meaning. So we're not just kind of like running around in the woods, and there's a way to enjoy it. It's fun to be talking to you now as I talk. I don't 5 minutes ago I wasn't talking at this register. I'm turning it on, baby. And it's fun to turn it on.
And this is exactly where I thought we'd get to today, which is the vertical and the horizontal.
Beautiful.
Axis.
You Buddhist master, just do
it. And apparent reality and the sort of more unconditional quality of how things actually are. So it's how they are and how they appear, which is in every spiritual tradition. You'll find this expressed some way or another, and the tension between those two things.
Yes.
Which means you go to church on Sunday, but on Monday you're actually donating, you know, you're helping people out in a food kitchen. You're, you know, helping an old woman across the street.
Yeah.
And, you know, how it's interesting. And, you know, me, I always connected just because that's my tradition to the Buddhist and particularly Tibetan Buddhist perspective is it's called Dundam and Kunsap. And Dundam is absolute reality, unconditional, just the way it is. You know, you don't have to do anything. It's just kind of intact. And Kunsap is relative reality. And it literally means all dressed up. It's just what you were just talking about.
No way. Kusap
all
is
dressed up.
All dressed up. Whoa.
You recognize that, yes, you do put on the suit. You do put on a tuxedo to go to the Academy Awards or whatever it is. And you do put on a tie to meet your girlfriend's parents, even though you know, that's not your style. and you do set the table nicely for people to come, even though
They're just your
silverware can
friends.
get.
They're the same idiots and jerks you were having coffee with 2 days ago, but now we're putting out the cutlery. Yes,
Yeah.
because
that's
it's kusap,
kunzap.
kunzap.
Yeah, all dressed up, and but recognizing that it's empty. So the difference in the materialistic world, you don't recognize the emptiness of it, right? It just seems like this is it. This is what's important. This is the final answer. And in the sort of spiritual domain, you don't really give any credence to the kind of relative unfolding of reality and the small relational things that happen during a day.
Right.
But in another way, you could integrate those two so that you can get fully involved and engaged in the play that you're in, but you never have mistaken it for any kind of absolute reality.
Because that would cause you, that would make you pain. It would make you paranoid. It would make you depressed.
Jealous.
Yeah. If this is all there is, yes, jealous, bubbling with competition and jealousy. This is so great because I wanted to talk about what you wanted to talk about. And I texted you and you said, this is what you wanted to talk about. And this is what I wanted to talk about. Because if you remember, like a week, of course you do, a week or two ago, I called you, as I do, when I'm having a little crisis. I'm not having a crisis today. I feel fantastic today. So I'm trying to honor Crisis Pete and remember him. But Crisis Pete, because it was serious. Right now I'm like whistling. I'm just like, what was that all about? But there are people listening that may be feeling this, which is I was starting to panic. I was getting a little too close to what I would consider ultimate reality, meaning you even hear this in the Christian tradition. I was getting it from A Course in Miracles, but I'm also reading James Finley's book, and he talks about how God alone is real. Like everything else is sort of like a play or a dance. It doesn't have to be nefarious, but it's not real. It's and you could even look at it scientifically. You could go, it's all molecules, it's all atoms. It's you can do it from wherever you want to stand. And you go like, but it seems like it's a shirt, And I was starting to panic because I was like, what about, I was getting too much of, well, the way it was manifesting, and we can get to this in a moment, but I'll load it into you, is I was like, if God alone is real and God is perfect oneness, God doesn't even know about this world, which in the way that we think of knowing. You know what I mean? Like subject object. God is over here in heaven and he's watching me and David have a conversation. That's not perfect oneness. That's two-ness. That's God over here watching David and Pete. So it's
actually voyeurism is what it really is.
It's disgusting voyeur. Yeah. We've made this observation before that's kind of freaky. I mean, I just took a shower. But
it's hard to reckon with the fact that nobody's watching.
Right. Is that how you feel? Do you feel no one's watching?
Nobody's watching.
That's great. That's what I was going to ask you. So, but that can freak you out. So let's unpack that. I want you to unpack it. When you get into Vedanta, when you get into non-dualism, it doesn't have to be Vedantic. It can be Christian non-dualism. It can be just private. Dude, the more I look at science, I was just watching a Charlie Kaufman movie, and he's kind of a famous nihilist. And he was breaking down how everything ultimately is one. So like, physics, religion, we get to this thing that it's all one thing. And if it's all one thing, there's no subject object, and there's nobody that knows about David. Please unpack that. And why aren't we freaking out if that's the case?
Well, first of all, it's so sweet, isn't it? The whole thing.
What a great place to start. Yes, it is.
There is a sweetness underlying the whole thing that I think when we all slow down enough to appreciate what's really going on, that there's an underlying tenderheartedness to the whole, even these kind of heart-wrenching conversations.
I agree. I also thought you meant sweet, almost like a child, kind of wanting to understand why the sky is blue, and grown-ups can get panicky about why the sky is blue, but there's a tenderness to just kind of an innocent, what's going on here? Is that what you mean by sweet? Unpack sweet for me.
Tender, tender, soft-hearted, not defended, not frightened either. And so You know, like when we saw Mitch McConnell freeze the other day, did you see that?
No,
You didn't see that in the
no,
news?
I'm
So
over here
Mitch,
and I'm playing with GI Joes
yeah.
and shit. I don't know.
Well, you know about the, oh, Mrs. Goldberg, did you see what happened over there in Afghanistan? She said, I don't see nothing. I live in the Beck.
No, that's great.
You live in the Beck.
I live in the
So
back. Yeah.
yeah, well, Mitch McConnell, who maybe somebody could have vilified if they wanted to or needed to, as somebody who represents a kind of series of you know uh, positions and power that are contrary to what we might think of as our healthy way to go,
Mm.
is standing at the lectern, with the Republican guys, the whole thing, and he zoned out for a good 30 seconds.
Oh wow.
He literally went like this.
Oh wow.
He froze, hit a mind freeze, and on CNN,
Wow.
the
On CNN
cameras.
or in
Well, just the
C-SPAN?
cameras were rolling,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
there's no way that somebody could, And at that moment, he looked like, and then he came to, and they were saying, "Are you okay, Mitch? And you want to go back to your office?" Or he had no idea what had happened. It was probably, like similar to petit mal, a small seizure or a zoning out, but he was
Well,
quite gone. And you looked at the face, and you could see him as a little boy. You could see,
yeah.
and now obviously you want to keep your aggression drummed up, and you want to stay angry. But what I mean by the sweetness is you see something like that, even to somebody that you may not be in concord with at the
Yes.
moment, and you feel sympathy.
I think of Trump sleeping all the time. You know what I
Ah,
mean? The vulnerability of a sleeping Donald. Like just, and I'm not trying to humiliate him. I'm saying he's drooling a little bit. He's in some sort of weird twisted position. He needs the covers. You know what I mean? Like there's something helpful to me about thinking about somebody that I may not agree with on this, that, or the other, pulling up the sheets in their sleep, like their body was
mm,
cold. And
mm,
I can't really handle it. I can't
mm,
handle the tenderness and the vulnerability, the dandelion-like quality of all of us. And a lot of these dandelions put on suits and we comb our hair in a certain way
yeah,
and we yell real loud. And I'm like, I do the same thing with bodybuilders. Dave Bautista, put him in the ocean. Put him in the ocean. Like these
yeah,
big fucking guys. Put him in something bigger than him, and instantly, where's your power? It's gone. And that I don't do it to humiliate them. I
mm,
do it
mm,
to
mm,
go, so stop. It's
mm,
relational. My
mm,
thinking Dave is big is because I'm not a mountain. And my
mm,
thinking Trump is whatever, a blowhard, let's say, is because
mhm,
I'm forgetting that he's a baby. He's a
mm,
dandelion, like you
mm.
and like me and like all of us. So the sleep thing helps. The like or eating a bowl of soup alone in a mall,
Well,
blowing on it.
this is a very profound issue for us now because, uh, like Friday night, I have to teach a workshop in Japan on the path of the warrior.
Mm,
So this notion of warriorship is a very powerful idea, but the two elements to the more nuanced version of warriorship is gentleness and fearlessness. It's not just fearlessness; it's gentleness and fearlessness. So it has a sort of a
well,
mother-father energy to it. So the question is how can you, um, act in the world in a way that is, and we're gonna. It's funny, I'm teaching in Japan, but we're going to talk about Bushido,
mm,
because they already have the code over there.
mm,
They have the source code. It's if you just look at Bushido and what it's advocating in a samurai, it's the sense of compassion is one of the things, virtue, developing virtue, um, integrity, all the
mm.
things that if you could get people to tell you what was important to them, the list would be would be very similar, I think, for a lot of
Mm,
people. Don't you think?
mm.
That if you idealized it,
Well, I love even you just reminding me of those words, taking us back to the horizontal and the vertical, right? Is I do catch myself. And as you were saying that, I was like, right, I'm a father. I want to model these things for Leela, right? I lose them all the time, Nikki. This going back to what you were saying, no one's watching. And I've had spiritual experiences some on drugs, some not on drugs, where I've really experienced like the oneness and the all okayness. And so it's not coming from a place of terror, but sometimes I go, there's almost like I lose touch with what you just said, like the idea of integrity and courage and all that stuff. Cause I'm kind of like, I don't know, man, who cares? And it's sort of a dangerous and soft place for me. Cause then I start to retreat from life. Cause I'm like, it doesn't matter. And that's not the sweet spot for me. I was very excited to tell you that I did a show last night, and I hadn't done a show in a while. It was all new material, and it was like getting a blood transfusion. Today, I'm myself. I'm not afraid. I'm connected. I feel part of something. The audience and me merged, and it was absolutely life-giving, anxiety and fear reducing. And today, the world is beautiful, and I couldn't just conceptualize my way there. I couldn't just go like, I'm one with God, so everything's okay. I had to do stand-up comedy. What does that make you think of?
It makes me think of a baby and a nipple is what it made me think of. If I could just speak spontaneously.
Yeah, sure. Getting what I need.
Yeah, and
and doing what's natural too. It's natural.
And having the exchange with here's the thing, the vertical, if misunderstood, can become nihilism.
Yes.
You feel eternal, non-dual. There's no point in engaging the horizontal. There's no point in doing stand-up comedy. There's no point in having children. And the eternal, kind of sensibility pulls you back from engagement at a relational level.
Can I just interject and say the vertical, we've been talking about it, we mean like kind of divine, God, higher truth, ultimate truth, horizontal being your life, your day-to-day, just in case people didn't know.
Yes, and vertical also means timeless.
Yeah.
Because embedded in us is the experience of timelessness, whether we have acknowledged it or not. Everybody, it's like a little tickle in the back of everybody's mind. Oh, this is timeless. This is, and ironically, and this is, congratulations, whoever formulated this, the timeless is related to extreme nowness. That's the only access that we have to it. Yes. Any other version of it is a fiction.
Right. Mitch McConnell.
Well, those are that was what was also interesting about it. You see these great yogis, these Tibetan yogis, and they're in a similar
as Mitch.
Well, it's like, but it's suffused with awareness. It's different, but nothing is happening.
Yeah,
it's clear that nothing is going on. There's no need to speak. There's no need to do anything. But the quality of it is awareness. Whereas the quality with absorption states, whether physical or drugs or whatever, is that there's opaqueness and the lack of awareness. So that's a very important distinction, because as people practice spiritual traditions and they access certain states of mind, the question is, do they become absorbed into them and kind of addicted to it, almost, you could say, or can they let it come and go and recognize this sort of fundamental quality of timelessness in it, that it doesn't need to be sustained in any way.
Right.
It doesn't need you to attach to it or try to sustain it in any way. It is actually the ground of being.
Right. You're thinking you're leaving this place where God isn't to a place where God is by taking ayahuasca or something. And then you come back to the waiting room. And it seems to me that spirituality is going like, well, I believe it's a psalm. It's like, I make my bed in the depths, you are there. I go to the heavens, you are there. All of these traditions seem to have this idea of like, where could you go that isn't saturated in the ground of being, which is, the mystery we call God or isness or awareness or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And ironically, you can bias the person's accessing it in the Tantric Buddhist tradition. They call it ordinary mind. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Ordinary mind. So you don't look for it in the extraordinary. There's nothing about it that like we were with a group of people meditating last night out here, and I heard this woman give this rap, and it's like, oh, there's planets and you could send your thoughts out and project it. you know, and then, you know, there was a little dog uh, behind her going like that while she was doing that.
Hmm.
And that's the ordinary mind more than the projection out of your consciousness out into the universe.
I agree. Isn't that a temptation as well? I mean, I have friends and I love these friends. I wouldn't change them for the world, but we want to talk about UFOs and other life forms and other planets and everything. And I'm sort of like, it's not ordinary mind, is what you're saying. And the people that I love are like stones. They're here. They're finding it on the plate they were served instead of looking over across the street at the restaurant where they like are cooking at the table like a Benihana, like something exciting. Right?
Benihana.
Yeah, Benihana. Nothing's more exciting than a Benihana. Am
Yeah.
I right about that?
Well, no, it's and that's where the all dressed up, the Kunzab thing becomes an obsessive costume party with disguises rather than ornamentation. You know, you're looking to disguise yourself. You're not comfortable being seen
Yes.
as you are,
Right.
rather than your regalia is some kind of ornamentation and elaboration of your basic good quality. You know,
Right. Right.
it's a hiding
So,
out. So you know, a lot of people, we're hiding out. You know what I mean? We're not really willing to show up very simply and very plainly.
because it's too painful, maybe.
Embarrassing is my favorite word these days.
Well, you've just walked into a very warm space because Val and I, in uncovering the phrase, "I'm sorry I was embarrassed," is the most valuable phrase I think I've learned as a grown person. Like that's the wisdom of my 40s. Is you start overreacting and you just go, "I'm sorry I was embarrassed." Like you were
Yeah.
embarrassed, you didn't know something, you did something, you looked weird, you're back in junior high for just a second, you're in your body, it's pooping, it's farting, it's burping, it's scared, it has all these psychological needs, these physical needs, these respect needs. It's embarrassing and it's hard to deal with. Is that what you mean?
That is exactly what I mean. And you know, I'm not surprised you stumbled on that word, but I think if people lined up their biggest fears, you know, and said, if you just look day to day, embarrassment is way up there.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, and if you're running a company or like, you know, think about, you know, working with people like you do and stuff. If you embarrass somebody, you've put them in a really bad place.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
They're going to really create any kind of counterpoint to alleviate that. And you know, it sounds like so dramatic, but it's like the emperor has no clothes. It's that premise, you know.
In what
People
way?
know that. Well,
I know that story. The emperor is naked and nobody wants to tell him. It's actually an incredibly powerful metaphor. It comes up a lot in show business, especially.
yeah.
Emperor's naked. Nobody will say anything until a child finally points out the emperor has no clothes.
Well, because everybody else is in on the con.
Right. They're on the payroll.
They have skin in the game.
Yeah.
You know. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm the Duke, so I can't tell the guy. He'll defend himself and he'll undukify me. You know.
That's
But
right.
the kid doesn't know. So the kid goes, he's not wearing anything, and then everybody goes like,
Right.
you know. So who is that kid? That kid is kind of, you know, innocence or pure perception, or just you know, it's not it's consciousness without an elaboration of a need to create a self and an identity and defend the crap out of that, and
Yeah.
you know, manipulate it and con it and seduce
Work
it
it.
and attack it. You know,
Yeah.
it's
So
just
the kid, oh, sorry.
yeah. Go ahead.
I'm tying it back to the embarrassment. The kid has to come in and say, you were just embarrassed.
No, the kid isn't embarrassed, but everybody else realizes that the reason they didn't tell the truth is because they were too embarrassed.
Yeah.
Or they had too much skin in the game. That's
I
probably
mean,
something else we should consider too, right? Along with the embarrassment.
oh, for sure. You'll never see people more full of shit than once money and power and status gets involved. Like I've said this before, but when you're in certain powerful circles, you'll notice everyone's laughing in the same cadence as the boss. And you're just like, that's the emperor has no clothes. That's like, once you start feeding somebody and giving health insurance to their children, you can pretty much say goodbye to honest discord. If I'm feeding you and paying your wife's medical bills, you're not going to tell me as clearly or as plainly that this sucks or that sucks. And you see that I love movies about corporations. I keep pushing the movie BlackBerry. It's about the BlackBerry phones. And of course, there's a guy trying to tell the other guy who's drunk on power that he's cruising towards a wall, and no one wants to tell him because they all have stock. and they all are making millions of dollars, but there's always one child saying the emperor has no clothes. It's very
Right.
valuable. Yeah.
It's profound in a way, because if you're trying to build, like, for example, both you and I are actively engaged in the world. You have your a fully launched an art career of presenting your creativity to larger and larger groups of people. I'm developing this company, Dharma Moon. We have 20 employees. We're trying to introduce meditation practices to people in a way that's accessible and but also authentic. Which is kind of that's a hard enough combination to put together. It's not really great marketing to say, well, you might get bored and frustrated when you meditate, because everybody else is painting a rosy picture of it. And also, by the way, this whole rigmarole you have going on, it's going to like decay and die. You're going to die. So that's the Buddhist. The best the Buddhists can do for the marketing is boredom.
Well,
and
this
death.
is why this is why Christianity, from a marketing standpoint, I mean fundamentalist Christianity, not what I would consider authentic Christianity, but like they have a much better sales pitch. You're going to die. You're going to go one place or the other. So you better believe now. That's literally how I would sell you an iPhone. You know what I mean? It's the same strategy that I would sell you a car. You're gonna die. You should live. You should enjoy. You know what I mean? And you're over there going, you're gonna die. It doesn't matter. This is gonna be boring and hard. That's a much more difficult sell.
But they don't want to tell you about the dark night of the soul that all the saints went through,
Of course,
including Jesus Christ. Didn't he have a dark night of the soul?
Oh yeah, the whole thing. Take this cup from my mouth.
Yeah. So the fact that there might be, a journey implied that is not going to be in alignment with your wishful thinking.
That's
simply put.
Absolutely. That's underreported, and I think it would make Christianity so much sexier. I'm always trying to remind people, or more exciting is what I mean. Meaning baptism, as I've said a million times, is a drowning ritual. It's killing, it's murdering you, and you come back as something else. You've died. And the St. John of the Cross and others that talk about their dark nights of the soul, they talk about like a peak that they have to go to. And let's say the peak is enlightenment or self-realization or conversion is what Christian would call it. You have to go, and even Jesus doesn't go with you. It's like Thomas Merton talks about, when you die, you're alone. You might be in a bed. You could even pull all your loved ones up onto the bed with you, but you die alone. And he goes, the paradox is the way away from that terror isn't to deny the solitude. It's to drink deeply of that solitude, embrace it and explore it, and discover that what you consider aloneness is actually infinite oneness. It's the you're good. And I've had death experiences. Again, some of them have been on drugs, some of them are not. But you go home. Like, going home is such a weak way of saying it. It really is like you're discovering that what you thought was zero was the whole thing. Does that make sense?
Yes, and the aloneness really rings out, and I think that's something for people to wrap their minds around. We're not talking about nihilism, which is, oh, I'm alone, it doesn't matter, even if I fell in love, we're both going to die. It's not that. And the opposite extreme is eternalism, which is that, we'll all be protected, we'll all be safe. There's something in between in which nobody can really go there with you, actually.
That's right. But why that's not dark, because here I am, you're saying that, and it's delighting me. When, as Merton says, when you drink deeply of what you perceive as a separate individual, you perceive it as nothingness. When you go into that through meditation, through quiet, whatever it might be. Obviously, Merton was a cloistered monk. He was doing a lot of silence work. When you get comfortable enough and trustful enough and brave enough too, to go, what is this thing inside me that when I'm not thinking or doing that I'm afraid of, when I go into it, it's the prodigal son. You realize actually you've just come home and your father throws a party for you. Of course, that sounds silly, but it's just a way of kind of tasting a little bit that the nothing is trustworthy. Would you agree that nothing is trustworthy?
Yes, in a sense, I would agree. And in another sense, I would say who's doing the trusting is what the very issue is.
Mm.
And that's why I said there's nobody watching. That's not a nihilistic statement. Like, and there are exercises that you can do, in any kind of training, of looking, like, let's take just the meditation tradition, the Buddhist tradition. First thing you do is look at this heavy fog of thoughts that you have that has become your reality. You're in a movie, basically, and it's just scene after scene after scene inside your mind, right?
Mm.
And you start noticing that moving because you're now not participating in that, you're just watching it. So they call that the witness or the abstract watch or something like that. You begin to notice your own mind for the first time as having this kind of narrative to it, this
It's like, I was going to say you're knowingly unconscious.
You're watching the stream of not really wakeful thoughts and emotions parading by as it does, but without engaging it. So that's a very different thing. You're developing a different relationship to seeing it. Now, what is it that's seeing that is another point.
Right.
Who is that's seeing that without being involved in it, without engaging it? And you might call it the witness consciousness or the abstract watcher. There's different names for it. It's a kind of still awareness with a sense of self attached to it. It's subtler. It's like a subtler Pete, a smarter Pete, a more aware Pete is watching gross Pete out in the world, going blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
Now, in other practices, you start looking at subtle Pete and you go, okay, what is subtle Pete made of? Just like you looked at gross Pete is made of all these kind of habitual patterns and stories, right? Now, subtle Pete is more like pure awareness, but still has some kind of perspective of existence that you think, yeah, I'm subtle Pete. I'm conscious. I'm awake. I see it. But when you look directly at that, that's kind of Mahamudra style of meditation. You look directly at that and see if there's anything there to identify. Look at subtle Pete.
Is there, when you look at subtle David? Is there something?
It can. You can look. There's two ways. You do it experientially, and you just kind of go, okay, let me just feel my way to subtle. You get the difference between gross Pete and subtle Pete, right?
I do. Yep.
Okay, so subtle Pete could feel like I'm progressing on my path. I'm seeing my habitual patterns. I'm much less reactive than I was. I'm still caught up with this, that, and the other thing, but I have a vantage point. It's like the referee in the tennis match. You're sitting higher and you're seeing the play of the game. Now, when you direct whatever lens there is directly towards that experience of the witness, the observer, you either will come up with possible explanations for what that is. Oh, that's pure awareness. That's God. That's whatever you come up with, or you begin to find that you can't find it. So the Buddhist approach is in not finding. There's a lot of power. That's why it goes in through that form as emptiness kind of realm. In not finding something, that's a legitimate experience. Is not finding something you expected to be there.
Finding is not finding.
Well, if you can't find the thing, that can be a very productive thing to do, is to not find something. We normally think, I got to find this. I got to find subtle Pete. I got to define it. I got to get words for it. I got to form a club around it. I got to, build rituals to recognize it. But if you really look directly at it, it's usually the case over the centuries that it gets more and more ephemeral and elusive, and dissolves.
It's funny, the traditions that I study more often would say ineffable, or words fail it, and it's an experience that you can't describe. But you're saying it because it's not really. Would you say it's not there? It's funny. This is that Buddhist thing where the razor is just a little bit sharper and it shaves just a little bit closer, because there's a comfort in going like, it's so beautiful I couldn't describe it, but that still implies that it was there. You're saying actually the zero of it, the good, healthy, right zero, was its own answer. Is that right?
Well, yes. And if you get to that point, you can rest in that. That's part of that instruction. Just rest
in the zero,
in not knowing, in the ineffableness.
Yeah.
Rather than resting in the description of it, you rest in the actual experience of it. And so and here's the irony. They say there's bliss there,
Right.
but the couple is bliss and emptiness, are coupled together, bliss and emptiness. Now, emptiness means you can't, as you said, in ineffable, you can't really define it. You can't really cling to it. You can't really bottle it. You can't really get back to it. You can't really cultivate it. All those things would fail. So if in dissolving that completely, literally, Pete, you know this, but there's practices that people do to this day in caves and mountains called rainbow body, where they go into a cave, a yogi goes into a cave and practices, and the whole body dissolves, and only the hair and the nails are left on the floor of the cave after 2 weeks.
I've heard stories of that. I've never heard it called rainbow body.
Rainbow body, because everything, the material, the gross matter dissolves basically.
They
Now,
dissolve themselves?
Is essentially into light.
And through meditation, I suppose?
Through a very specific set of practices. Now, that's like, people shouldn't get too crazy about it. It's very advanced practice, and it counterindicates a bodhisattva intention of like, I'm going to keep working with the gross material. I'm going to work with other people. I'm going to help. I'm going to clean the toilets. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to be a good servant for others. So,
but that's interesting. Yeah, go ahead. So,
but the essence of our being, that's what I'm saying, is if you look for that something solid, that is our being, either at a physical, emotional, or even mental level, it's very hard to find.
It's interesting. I have two thoughts about that. One, what you're saying, if you dissolve in a cave, you're not helping, say, me or you.
We
you're
wouldn't
not
be having this conversation, that's for sure.
Right, exactly. But there's also part of me that goes, it's all one. It's all a dream is a nice way to put it, or Leela. It's a dance. It's a play. So would you talk a little bit about, like, there is no such thing as private salvation or private enlightenment? It's like there's only one mind, and if that
no, because
mind,
there is such a thing.
What do you mean?
As private?
Yeah. You think so?
Well, I mean, I'm sort of chronically Buddhist in my perspective, but it's called the Hinayana, the narrow vehicle.
Buddhist.
Yeah, I mean, the narrow vehicle is, your individual salvation. It's called Sosotarpa in Tibetan, individual liberation. And you are free from the wheel. You're not being reborn in those 6 realms of, like, pleasure seeking or fear.
Interesting. But isn't there part of you that thinks that was just written so that your one mind, the one mind that you and I share, that we're aspects of, is just kind of booby trapping itself to trip? And when you, David, wake up, you will go, oh, that was just a way that David could understand. He made Buddha, he made your guru, he made all these teachers, and they seem to have private enlightenment to show me that I could do it. But in the end, it was just me. It was your dream. It was one dream.
In the Buddha's Sangha, there were people called arhats, and they were people who had achieved this. And they went to sit in a different section they went to the loge,
Oh, VIP loge.
Yeah, the VIP loge. But then there were the bodhisattvas, which was another level of accomplishment, because those were people who had taken on a bigger vision about what's possible. And then there's the Buddhas, who probably are closer to what you're talking about. My best estimate would be a Buddha is no longer vetting these distinctions. There's no need. The compassion is the same as the emptiness. The emptiness is the same as the form. The oneness is the same as the multiplicity.
Yeah.
And there's spontaneous existence, which is kind of not calibrated the way we do every day.
Talk about this. Talk about this. Because you and I are presupposing time and David will wake up here, and the Buddha woke up then, and Jesus woke up here, or whatever it is. But when I was telling you about time, either eternity is true or time is true, and it seems to me that eternity is true. And talk about the idea that it's all happening at once, and it's all already happened, and the relief of that.
Well, so in any system that has evolved over time for working with people, there's a gradual sort of sense of training, right? And then there's a kind of quicker sense of training, and then there's, you could say, more advanced kind of training. Depends on the student, technically. So in terms of Buddhism, the kind of more fruitional type of teachings point very directly towards the sudden quality of enlightenment. Like Zen, for example, they just pap,
Yeah.
And there's no instruction. There's no, hey, work with compassion, man. Work with your dark shadow. It's just pep, And
You
you
hear
realize
stories
that,
someone blows out a candle after reading the Diamond Sutra, and that's when they become enlightened. Yeah, I love
yeah.
those stories.
And the fact is, if you blew out a candle, if you set the right situation up with any human being and blew out a candle in the right way, they would have a glimpse of some kind of unfabricated experience that they had not or have lightning. That's a good one.
Have lightning?
Yeah, just a lightning flash,
Oh, okay.
a real one. People, you know, Pete. The joke is, this is the joke. Since you're a comedian, the guy who has one line in the play.
Mm-mm.
You know it.
I don't know the joke.
He has, his line is, they blow off a cannon, in the play, and he's supposed to say, "Hark, I hear the cannons roar." That's his one line. So of course he's practicing at home with his wife and his kids, and he's walking around the house. Hark, I hear the cannon. Like, should I say it this way? Should I say it that way? And every rehearsal, of course, they don't fire off the real cannon at the rehearsal, and so at the rehearsal, he goes, "Hark, I hear the cannons roar." And then even at the dress rehearsal, they don't want to waste the ammunition, so he gets to the dress rehearsal. Now it's the actual opening night. And of course, they blow off the real cannon. He goes, "What the fuck was that?"
This whole time I thought it was, as a comedian, I'm trying to think of where it might go. That it's going to be like cannons, I hear the hark roar or something like that. So much better. What the fuck is that?
It's related to what we're talking about. If you create a sudden shift in the situation, our continuous narrative will get broken, interrupted, which is kind of Zen style or sudden style. They say moo, right? There's another one, it's a Zen knock knock joke. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting cow.
Interrupting cow.
Moo.
How is that Zen? That's my daughter's favorite joke.
Because the Zen people say moo. Did you know that?
What do you mean?
It's like it cuts through discursive thought. It's emptiness.
Right.
Moo. It's suddenly awake. In our tradition, we call it suddenly free from fixed mind. So everybody can have a moment of in which there's no ineffable, there's no quality to it at all other than itself. But it lasts for just a very short period of time, right?
This episode is brought to us by our friends at Ritual Multivitamins. They also make my favorite prebiotic, postbiotic, and probiotic all in one. Their Symbiotic Plus. It's a huge part of my gut health regimen. It's also the only multivitamin that I've ever taken and seen real difference. What does that mean? It means I take it in the morning and I'm ready to face my day. It doesn't get peed out. Everybody that I talk to about multivitamins says the same thing. It doesn't get absorbed. You just pee it out. It turns your pee into like predator blood, like neon colors. This one doesn't do that because it waits until it's in your lower intestine to break down so it can be absorbed and into your body. I was always having vitamin deficiencies when I went to the doctor. Ritual has taken a huge crack at that and made a big, big difference in my life. So you can talk about fantasy football with your friends all day, but asking them for health advice isn't really the move. Ritual takes the guesswork out of the vitamin game. Their multivitamin for men is based on science to help fill common nutrient gaps in the diet and level up your nutrient goals. It is an all-around win. It's scientifically developed with high-quality key ingredients in clean, bioavailable forms. It's your new type of two-a-days for helping support heart health with omega-3 DHA, to normal muscle function and normal immune function with vitamin D3. This small step can have a major impact. That is certainly true for me. It is traceable, it is vegan-friendly, non-GMO, sugar-free, gluten-free, major allergen-free, doesn't break a fast, doesn't upset your stomach if you're fasting, which is huge for me. Capsules delayed release, as I mentioned, and even has a minty essence in every bottle to keep things fresh and help make taking your multis every day actually enjoyable. And as I said, I blend it with their Symbiotic Plus for my gut health. It's like a second brain. You got to keep that microbiome all healthy and running smooth and fill those gaps. It's huge. Support your body. Support this show. I take it every single day. You guys should get into it as well. Essential for Men is a quality multivitamin from a company you can actually trust. And get this, Ritual is offering my listeners 30% off. 30% off your first month. Visit ritual.com/weird to start Ritual or add Essential for Men to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/weird. All right, everybody, let's get back to David Nichtern.
Well, it's interesting. This is bringing me back to last night. Val and I, again, I'm in my 40s, Val's in her 30s, but we're like realizing the importance of disruption. Val's always planning trips, and she knows, she'll listen to this. This isn't shit talk, meaning I'm the grump that's just a little bit less likely on my week off to be like, let's get on a plane and go to the Ozarks. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not, it's not what I would do. But
Right.
I am smart enough to know that I'm wrong. I'll give my, I'm smart enough to trust Val. And then we go, or a better example is we went on a camping trip with our daughter's preschool class. And, you know, you sleep on the ground, and the rational mind says, what are we doing sleeping on the ground? This is so stupid. But then you are happier, you're lighter. And this isn't why you do it, but then the next time you sleep on your bed or take a shower, you're like, this is glorious. All of these things came through doing something that didn't make any sense. So and when I do stand-up, it forces me into my body, it forces me into the moment, and it's this grand disruption. I don't know how it's going to go, especially doing new jokes. Feels very moo to me, and that can snap me into it. Are we saying the same thing?
Yeah. So you, through your craft, then you're putting yourself in a situation where you can be suddenly free from fixed mind.
Right.
As part of the experience of you know, being creative and being, you know, and keeping it fresh.
And that's what a painter is doing, and that's what a basketball player is doing. That's what a rock climber is doing. But that
Musicians.
it's so, and absolutely, and specifically the kind of music you do that's improvisational and flowing. But it's funny looking for things that the listeners can get. It's so easy to say, but it's hard to do. Like, take a different route home, like walk the other direction, eat something you haven't eaten, watch something you haven't seen. Even if you don't want to, you have to. There's this like stone mole inside of the animal, inside of all of us, that just wants its meals and its TV and its bed, and it wants to, you know, orgasm occasionally, and it wants to be warm. And it's such a snooze, but like, it's so seductive. You know, it's calling us towards the rocks, and we crash and we die. You know, sorry to force this, but like, I do cold exposure. I get in 39-degree water every morning. And one of the mantras that carries me through is I go, this is life. I say, L'chaim, this is life. This is the opposite of being in a nursing home. I'm coursing with fuck yeah. You know what I mean? It's warrior energy. You were talking about that earlier. It's a disruption. And I know I don't want to sound like an old man, but that is what, in my 40s, I figured out that everything you want is on the other side of something you don't want. And you should want what you don't want. You should want what you don't want is absolutely a key.
Wow. Well, yes. And that is folding this naturally occurring event into the realm of intentionality is what you're really talking about there.
You meaning it's happening anyway?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is even creepier.
Tell me, sorry, keep going. You go.
Well, just that what we take to be the floor of our experience is a fake floor. It's just by nature, there's access to discontinuity. What we're really talking about is, you would call discontinuity. We're used to making things like, okay, I'm going from here to there, and there's no gap, right? You know, you hear people talking about a gap. But the fact is, the natural mind has gaps in it. And another way of saying that to like bright young people, our mind is actually digital. It's not analog, which is interesting. In other words, there's about 128 frames a second of mental activity, according to Buddhist Dharma. And so each one is, you're actually switching, like film, you know, appears to be continuous, but there are actually, if you could catch it, there are gaps between each moment of apprehension. So we don't tune into the gap equality of it. Like, for example, the next time you walk into another room, notice that you might just have appeared in that second room and you don't remember how you got there. And you know, as a lucid dreamer, that's one of the ways you can tell if you're dreaming lucidly or not.
This is a weird synchronicity, man, because I was just thinking that I had coffee with my buddy 2 days ago, and I was like, how did I get here? And I was like, oh, yeah, I parked over there. And I went, that's how I know I'm not dreaming. I just
Yeah.
did this because that's the key to learn to do it in your dreams. You do it in your waking life. You go, how did I get to this? Oh, yeah, Val went off to go upstairs and I sent you the Zoom link. And, I have to, that's how I know I'm not dreaming
Yeah.
in a sleep dream. But yes, that's what you meant.
Yeah, that the gap quality is part of the activity of the mind. And in meditation, you're just allowing your awareness to experience that without trying to fill it. Now, normally the gap is kind of uncomfortable from ego's point of view. So you're trying to fill it, like, oh, I think I'll flatter this person, or I'll insult that person, or I'll take this uncomfortable feeling I have and tie it to a childhood memory. You're creating continuity of all kind. But the fact is, it's frame, frame, frame,
Because
frame, frame.
you're embarrassed and scared and it's too wobbly. Go.
Yeah, no, because that there's some hesitation, but the fact is, it's there anyhow, which is sort of course, we like
Oh,
to be
now I'm understanding what you're saying. It's
natural.
it's seamless. It's seemingly seamless interruptions woven together and built in the same way that our minds take the frame rate of television.
That's
and
right.
we know if we slow it down, it's not what's happening, but our brain fills in all the gaps and it exists in our minds. In the same way, reality is all of these fragments woven together in our minds. In the same way that our eyes flip the image upside down so we're not disoriented, the brain's job, which makes no sense, it's one of the things science doesn't understand, why our world should be upside down the way that the iris works, but it doesn't. The brain corrects it, which is wild. And the brain is also stringing these frames together. But the Buddhist, if I'm hearing you correctly, is trying to get a little bit more honest about the frames and find the comfort and the mystery and the bliss in the gaps. Am I forcing that?
Well, and the gaps are natural, and the only job you have, it's interesting because as somebody who teaches meditation quite frequently, most people from where I sit are working too hard at it to map it to their will, to make it do something that they want, as opposed to a sense of just adventure and exploration and just let's see what's happening. So the only job in this kind of practice is to notice the gap. That's it.
Notice the gap.
Nothing to do.
Yeah.
And then that's the vertical. Now, if it loosens it up, and if you re-enter the horizontal, you realize that on a more relative level, we got way too serious about something and what somebody said, or we made it too solid, too thick, and it's gapless. So the gap is a natural event, but it's also a way of tuning into openness and spaciousness within the actual continuity that we're experiencing. You could just be clueless for a second when you're having a fight with somebody. Normally, we don't want to allow for any confusion.
Yeah. Or not finding the next argument or the way to win or the way to posture. You kind of want to have a conscious Mitch McConnell moment.
With awareness.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Not a blankness, but a knowing pause. A breath.
Vastness with awareness mixed in.
A spacious thing.
Yeah, and it's just it's in us. It's part of us. We've gotten very driven.
Muji, who I love, talks about, he's like, don't try to open your heart or close your heart. He's like, the heart, what we're talking about when you say heart is an emotional state. He goes, the real heart is always open. And he goes, it's like space. And he said this, it really moved me. He goes, this space that we're in, with the room that we're in with the table and the chair, and you got your walls and David and all that stuff. He goes, this space 1,000,000 years ago was exactly the same. And he goes, fresh. And he goes, and in 1,000,000 years, it'll be the same, fresh. It's always fresh. And he goes, you are that. Like, stop thinking you're an uptight person and now you're a gracious person. I'm very guilty of that. I listened to my thing, I did my practice, and now I'm generous. And he's like, that's not you. The real you is like the space in this room is always fresh. I loved the word fresh. Talking
fresh,
like Trump. Yeah.
Fresh start. But then you come to the Kunzap part in that way of looking at it, the relational part. And it seems healthy and smart to also work on that level. gradual, just sort of because it's very hard to pull that much vastness and spaciousness down into
Agreed.
The relational world without giving the relative truth is also considered truth. It's not like the absolute truth trumps the relative truth. The relative truth has its own wisdom and its own sense of journey.
And it reflects
they reflect each other.
They reflect each other. That's what you told me that calmed me down. I was like, I love my daughter and she's fleeting and I'm fleeting. It's all fleeting. What are we doing? Let's just get to God already. It's almost like my remnants of fundamentalism. I'm like, we should just strike the set, burn it down. It's over. This is over. And you were like, yeah. And also your daughter's just her little hand is just holding my thumb right now. And you're just like, it's sort of wild. But one of the pitfalls of spirituality is you can have those little existential panics. I have them, to be honest. I have a good little panic. They don't even scare me anymore. I'm just sort of like, oh, it's here. I'm going like, what is this? And I don't like asking, what is this? What are you thinking?
Well, I think to some extent, this is very much the transmission from human being to human being. And I believe in that. So I'm a lineage kind of person. I'm not thinking, well, the past was crap and we should just disband it. So my teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, as you know, said some very seminal things.
I just wrote down Guru. I was like, I got to ask him about Trungpa.
Yeah. So it's he said to me at a certain moment in time when I was having a kind of stressful domestic situation, he said, don't panic when things are going bad. And don't relax when they're going well. So I took that as what we call a Pith instruction. I've repeated it many times to many friends and students. And it's a way to gauge, okay, you're in that situation. No matter what's happening, you think you're losing your grip, whatever, don't panic. And then on the other hand, when you think, I got this now, don't
relax.
Don't stabilize, try to stabilize that.
Don't atrophy.
Yeah. So, these are called Pith instructions, Pith, like essential instructions. And, Ram Dass had one that I use, right? Which came from Maharaji, which was love everybody and tell the truth. They sometimes have that quality of like, I could easily love everybody, man. It's beautiful. Except, you know what? And Ram Dass had the perfect student koan relationship. The truth is, Maharaji, I don't love everybody.
Right.
Ooh. And the truth is that I would rather things went smoothly and I'd rather relax and not have to face the fear of when things are not going well and freak out. So they're progressive. Your ability to integrate a Pith instruction is progressive. It's very hard to just, and then you've got it.
Which is interesting because that Ram Dass story sort of ends with him realizing, I could be wrong. Boy, it would be fun to be able to talk to him again. But I'm sure he said it somewhere. I'm not just saying that as an optimist. He recorded himself talking a lot. He was recorded a lot. But he sort of solved the love everybody and tell the truth thing, I think, by leaning into the paradox of it, kind of letting it break his brain like a koan, and going, but then also when he intellectualized it a little bit, he was like, well, I don't like, David, I don't like a lot of people. Like I get overwhelmed a lot, often by people who are like me. If I meet someone who's like me, I get overwhelmed and I'm like, wow, get this fucker away from me, like real weird.
What a gift.
What a gift. How's that?
What could be easier than just, you're seeing something so clearly there. This person's like me and therefore they're annoying me. I mean, that's like a short ride on a short bus route.
A short ride on the short bus. When I go, I don't like these people, but I know that's when I try, and I don't always succeed. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. It's kind of like the Muji fresh space thing. I try to go like, my father is challenging to me, but I know he's just in a costume. He's the same thing as me, and he's wearing a disguise. And I'm the same thing as him, and I'm wearing a disguise. It's helpful to me to remember that Pete is a character in the dream as well. Pete is no more real than my dad. It's all sort of nonsense. So hold it a little bit more lightly. And when I think Ram Dass would say, you don't have to like everybody, but when you love who they really are, that's how you can love them and tell the truth. Go, this guy's annoying to me.
So I heard a whole different thread when you
Really?
started talking about that. Yeah.
Huh.
Here's what I heard. This is just like, I heard my father and I are actually quite different.
Yeah.
I'm not like my father. And yet there's this pressure, somewhat coming from him for me to be like him, because that means he's succeeded in crafting his own survival and legacy.
Yeah.
And this is pressurizing for me personally. So I have to differentiate myself from my father, even though there's a lot of things drawing us together. There's something pushing us apart, and that creates a certain kind of tension in me about paving my own road. I don't know where that came from.
Oh, that's right on. That's absolutely true. The painful thing I say about my dad sometimes is I go, he loves John Mulaney. I love John Mulaney. Everybody loves John Mulaney. But what does my dad love about John Mulaney? My dad has never seen John Mulaney tell a joke. Never seen him tell a joke. He likes his haircut and he likes that he wears a suit. So I find that hurtful that
Well, that sounds like Pee Wee Herman then.
Yeah. What do you mean?
The haircut and the suit? You kidding me?
He could love that for sure. But Pee Wee's too silly. Bow tie, get out of here.
No, but the haircut and the suit is what I was referring to.
Of course. No, I get it.
Yeah.
But my dad doesn't like Pee Wee. He likes someone who looks like a Kennedy. And the thing that I find challenging about that is, my dad would rather I look like I'm together. Let's talk about John when he was struggling. Like John is sober now. He would rather I look together and look like a killer politician and have a secret addiction problem than be what I am, which is kind of look like however I look, not sharp, not slick, and be embarrassing him with my, whatever, my disclosures or whatever it might be. Does that make sense? Like he'd rather.
And that means that you and your dad are very different.
Yeah.
You're not like that at all.
No, I'm the opposite of that.
Opposite or different, very different. In other words, you don't
like
care how people look. You're a feeling kind of person, and you're looking into their heart and their experience. And so, it's a funny thing because the differentiation might be part of what we're all working with too, is our individuality, rather than having to move that to the all one thing. You know what I mean? You move it to the all one thing. Oh, well, it's just, we're all one. And therefore my dad and I are really the same. And,
well, yeah. How this is now the rubber's meeting the road. How then do I love my dad? If my dad is bothering me and challenging me, how can I love him or anybody and tell the truth? What did you take from that, Koan? Just the paradox of it, or is there a way to do it?
Because I got pulled into the particular experience that we're having. Love him because he's different.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
I'll tell you what happened. I don't do a lot of weed, but when I'm with my folks, I had just visited them when I saw you. I was about to go see them. And it was a challenging visit. It was hard for me. And sometimes after the visit, I would take this little microdose of marijuana, like 2.5 milligrams, which anybody that does marijuana is laughing at how small that is. It really is a very tiny dose. But when I would take it, sometimes I would be lying in bed with Val or falling asleep, and I would start laughing. And she'd say, "What are you laughing at?" And I go, "They're perfect." I didn't mean I liked them. Right. I go, "Oh my God, they're perfect." I couldn't script them in a million years, what they would say, what they would do. They are one of a kind. They are unbelievable. They broke the mold. Like, I'm not just saying that. This is not from a Good Son place. This is just honest journalism. They broke the mold. I've never met a person like them before or since. And they are unpredictable and absolutely, if you were looking under a microscope at amoebas, you'd be drawn to them and go, "What the fuck is this one doing?" So yeah. And in that slightly assisted place, or you could say, I don't know if you want to say it's bringing me up or bringing me down, but it was turning my brain off enough that I could get to a place where I was loving them, almost like I wasn't myself, like a depersonalized experience.
Well, almost like they weren't your parents.
Yes, that too. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hardest one. Let's face it. That's the home run of liberation.
Your parents?
I think so. I mean,
For
that's a
sure.
very big, deep, and it's interesting that in the monastic traditions, like in Tibet, they weren't raised that closely with their family. Those Rinpoches,
Mm,
they were like Trungpa Rinpoche was taken away when he was 2 years old, and
wow.
now the monastery, his teachers are really more like his parents. His
Wow.
mother's there. They have the mother thing, and from that they got a lot of compassion. But I never heard him talk about his dad.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if
Don't,
you were two and they took you to comedy Tulku school and
yeah. I
and you never
can't
saw your
actually.
dad?
The joke I was going to make, but out of respect, I didn't want to, was I was like, no wonder he drank, which is a joke. But there's also got to be people sometimes call Trungpa Rinpoche the drunken Buddha. I'm sure you've heard that before. That
Yeah, I mean, he
he
drank a
drank,
magnum of sake a day, a
and
magnum.
which is huge. If you don't know
It
what a
ki- it
magnum
killed
is, it's
it killed him.
enormous.
It took
It killed him.
his body couldn't handle it. He
And
died at 49.
he smoked cigarettes and he drank a very, very large amount of sake. Without, I haven't drank in over 6 years, but when I did, I loved sake more than anything. So I'm like, good choice. It's fantastic. And he smoked cigarettes. But don't you think, or do you think, that that's related? You don't know your parents. You're ripped into the world of Rinpoche ship. Don't you think there's a psychological level that's going to be like, well, I have a dad shaped hole and I'm going to fill it with booze, without watering him down at all?
Personally, that wouldn't be the way I would sum up what my personal experience of that situation
Yeah.
is. Um, it was, and because I lived through it and knew him very well and kind of experienced it firsthand, there was something unusual about him that I can't really, subject to kind of putting it into a kind of characterizable box or something like that.
Right. Right.
Because he was, from my limited perspective, had a much wider access to a lot of looking at the world that was beyond what I would consider like a sort of standard ego fixation kind of perspective.
You
But
mean
I
the
never,
on?
I,
Oh, sorry.
I never tried to copy him. And that's, I think, if I want to give a message to people out there who are looking for gurus, most people aren't these days. They just need a good spiritual friend, a mentor. The guru is another category, and it's very much built on earlier stages of practice and development. That if those aren't there, there's not going to be much role for a guru. So people are like diving into these relationships with gurus. I wish them good luck, but the guru is somebody who is going to take you on a very direct path towards recognizing that your notion of self it has a false bottom to it.
Mm.
So they're not exactly the nurturing Yoda-like person that you might wish that you had on that kind of journey. It's a dismantling, and so the idea of looking for security with a guru is, in my tradition, is a mistake.
Do you mean, it's funny when you said Yoda, I immediately picture him hitting Luke with that little stick. So he had like a sort of
Yeah, but he never
slight.
threw it. Here's the classic.
Tell me what you meant. Yeah, tell me.
The classic definition of a Vajrayana type of guru is they take you up in a plane, they teach you how to fly the plane, they jump out of the plane, taking the only parachute, and say good luck. This is very non-theistic. It's not, I'm going to save you, I'm going to nurture you, I'm going to protect you, I'll be watching over you. There's a sense of training somebody to take care of themselves properly. And if that becomes a sycophantic relationship, it's absolutely deadly. And this is just my estimation of the tradition. If you're looking for that person to protect you, to save you, they train you. It's like being trained.
I wrote down guru because I wanted you, I don't think you ever have, to tell a Trungpa Rinpoche story. How did he surprise you or shock you when he not coddling you? When did he jump out of the plane? When were you like, what the fuck is this? Were there months where you were like, this sucks, I hate this, I'm depressed, I'm broken, and then you had a big breakthrough? What happened?
The flip side is that in order to create that level of, you could say, dynamic growth in a student, dynamic evolution, there is some kind of faith that you have, confidence in that person's achievement, in that person's realization. So, for example, if you look at Maharaji, there were all kinds of things where he's pulling Ram Dass in to recognize the fact that he should trust him more at a certain level. So I did have that kind of ultimate trust, but it was tested regularly. And I'm not a faith-based person, as you know. I'm not a bhakti person. I'm like, you got to show me this stuff. Our tradition uses critical intelligence as the sword, and you're encouraged to use it. So there were times when I would describe it as stretching, and also I could recognize that it was me that was being stretched. It was my sense of myself that was being stretched. It was my resistance that was being stretched. It was my need to defend myself that was being stretched. And because I had confidence in him, I could open up to it and learn quickly.
And where did that come from? It's a hard question, but what did you observe in this person? It's silly, but these are the Western things. Was he calm?
Good. Yeah. I'm glad. I think people need to evaluate this much more seriously than it so far has happened in the West.
Yeah.
So I watched him like a hawk, and I watched other great Tibetan masters who, through his, the good fortune of being his student, we met a lot of the greatest Tibetan Buddhist masters of the 20th century, and saw them. I watched them. And I'm not just talking about on a stage, the sage on the stage. I'm talking about,
you watch them tie their shoes,
and then some.
Yeah.
And I never could find a trace of in Trungpa would say, of defending himself, of needing to con anybody or stabilize how he was perceived by somebody. Also, I never saw him do anything uncompassionate. And there was instances where I saw him do very small things that, even towards insects and things like that, where there was obvious care for sentient beings that was unflinchable. So I began to have, I had it intuitively right when I met him, because I probably had previous karmas with him. I felt the connection, maybe similar to what you felt with Ram Dass. And then going through certain experiences together, I found him different than most of the people I know, in that he wasn't defensive. And he was also really creative, really exploring situation. He was leading edge, exploring the whole thing of what is it like to bring this into the West. So he didn't cling to there's still Tibetans, it's all this. And so he manifested as a Western person. He put on a suit, he got married, he had kids. He was not afraid to talk about business or sex or, art, culture. So I guess I found that his view, as it was expressed, was both traditional and also very, very cutting edge. And that really appealed to me. I like both. I didn't want to just pure cutting edge. That person, he has roots that are very deep in the tradition. And then you take that to a cutting edge place. So that's an interesting question. I don't talk about it much with people because I don't think they need a guru. And I don't want them to think I'm their guru, that's for sure.
Yeah. So
no way.
I love this. You did what I would do. What I loved about it was you did what I would do. And I like that you're honest about it. Is like you were watching him like a hawk. And I do want to circle back and unpack it a little bit. The phenomenon that I've seen with some teachers, but not a lot. I mean, Ram Dass is not one of those people that ever would have claimed to be a guru or claimed that he wasn't defending himself. He would tell stories constantly where the foothold that people like me had to enter into the story was that he was defending his ego or his person or his rights, his psychological needs or whatever it might be.
Sure.
So he was very human in that way. But when there are a couple that I've listened to lectures or whatever, and they get like a Q&A and it's like the most annoying question in the world, and they just don't seem, they seem to think it's funny. Does that stir up any memory? When you say he's not defending himself, what do you mean?
Not only not defending himself, but there was again, some of this was codified into, sort of almost like slogans. He would say, "Your guess is as good as mine," for example.
Hmm.
But he would say, "Don't defend yourself," and even maybe more importantly, don't defend the Dharma. Oh, this person's, this priest is not pure, but Christianity is pure. The doctrine. Don't even defend the doctrine. So it's that doesn't mean you can't protect the health in this situation from obvious aggression and people who are trying to create confusion and hurt other people. That's a no-no. But you can, if somebody is asking a legitimate, honest question, that shouldn't threaten anybody. So like the way I teach is I say, you can ask anything you want. Like you just did that.
Mm-hmm.
You just exactly did that. If I'm sitting here going, this is the open way, this is the clear path towards the crystal blah blah blah, and you ask me a question, I go like, could we talk about something else? That's not so great.
Right. And that's what I pick up from you. I'm not gurufying you. I like an undefended, unsweaty, unclenched person.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So
I do.
You witness that in him. Like,
yeah.
I don't mean to harp on the drinking, but if somebody was like, "Hey, why do you drink so much?" Would he roll with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
There wasn't, you never experienced a taboo, like, oh, that's a tough subject.
No, he was pushing the envelope from that point of view. I would say, including the drinking, had some element of pushing the envelope.
Just being like a rascal, like a
well, I mean, this is something that's going to be very hard for people to calibrate, particularly, and I don't recommend this at all for people who are alcoholics in some way, which I don't happen to be. So like, and I also didn't imitate him in the sense of like, oh, I'm a student of his now, I've got to drink anybody else under the table.
Right.
But there is, in the tantric tradition, drinking is part of it.
Yeah, you told me that trying to go underwater real slow.
You're trying to, and I don't think this is that different from how I would use psychedelics if I use them. It's not escapism, because it's part of your sadhana that you're doing the psychedelic. If you're doing drinking or psychedelic as a way of, kind of pushing the envelope of your awareness, you have to use a lot of discipline. You have to have training. So that's another thing about him. Like he seemed to be able to navigate the space even when his body was intoxicated. His mind seemed very, very clear and lucid. It wasn't like, hey, fuck all you. I mean, it was like, it felt like the same Buddha mind.
You mean 8 p.m. Trungpa Rinpoche was the same as 8 a.m., so even if his body was acting differently?
Yeah, the mind was very, very steady.
Yeah, you're right.
In my experience, his mind was like a diamond and very clear. And it was almost like, siddha. It's like an ability, a capacity to handle that.
Yeah, City.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you.
He was considered a Mahasiddha by many people.
And that's
like a highly accomplished, realized being.
And are there why miracle stories, the clarity of his teaching? Like, what's going on?
I'm just going to stick with the clarity of his teaching. And for people these days, just read the books and see if it speaks to you. Because we get at Dharma Moon, we get a lot of young students, I mean, younger than you, like in their 20s, who love Trungpa Rinpoche. And they don't know him. I mean, even people twice as old as that have never met him. He's been dead for 35 years, just in case anybody didn't notice. You're talking about somebody who's been long, long gone physically. But I would say the clarity of his perspective, if you read a book like Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, it's so lucid and it's such a daring perspective of not conning people further with, oh, there's this magical mystery tour you could go on, and I'm the Pied Piper of it. It's like, it's wrathful. It's saying, let's not be fools.
Let's not be fools, and instead
use your intelligence
to
see what is true and what is wishful thinking.
So that
the guru thing can bring up a lot of wishful thinking.
Yeah. And what is uncovering the truth good for?
Well, the premise would be that in the absence of truth, we create fabrications that eventually unravel anyhow, and then we have a sort of cognitive dissonance and a lot of disarray and suffering. You're in a way you're saving yourself from
Suffering.
you're eating it now. You know.
Instead of wrapping it up in birthday paper and wrapping paper and postponing it and
Yeah.
unwrapping the turd later and being
Yeah.
really devastated.
Yeah, and I mean, many people have said these kind of things, that the truth is a powerful elixir,
Mm.
and that, you know, like there was a quote that just somebody posted the other day about him. He said, you know, enlightenment is profound, but so also is self-deception, and the obstacles are
Mm.
equally profound. I see the spiritual path as a very dangerous path. I don't think a lot of people see it that way. You could become a total big ass con artist.
Mm.
You know, it has the potential. I've seen it happen for people. They just get bigger than their britches. It's better to be a rock star, frankly.
More honest, maybe too.
Slightly.
Yeah. I know what you mean. It's dangerous. This is
Because
Jesus in the desert. The devil saying, "Let's use this to get famous," basically. Like, oh, I see what you're figuring out.
yeah.
Let's sell it, basically.
And that happened to Buddha too. It's called the Maras.
Yeah.
Daughters of Mara approached him and said, hey, this is, you know, you could be this, you could have that.
And a lot of people
Um,
stop there. The guy, when I watched the Nexium documentary, I
mm,
don't know if you watched that. I was like, moths are drawn to light. I'm not even putting down the moths, but I'm saying, like, I don't care what cult it was or how hurtful it was. These are people that listened to the Maras. These are people that listened to the temptation that goes, let's use this to get laid or to get rich or to get powerful or whatever. They didn't have the self-death that would make them appropriate teachers. What do you
and
say?
you know what the common thread is there? Because I study this stuff. I've been doing this 50 years, more than 50 years. I've watched the whole onset of Eastern religion into the West, just
Mm.
like a scribe or an archivist. I've watched everybody. I know most of the people. I've watched Zen people crap and burn. I've watched people. I've watched Trungpa Rinpoche's Dharma heirs crap out and get into very difficult and inexplicable situations. I don't hold anybody as immune from this, but here's what it seems to me: at a certain point, somebody no longer has. They don't listen to their teacher anymore because the teacher's gone, or they break away. They say, I'm not doing that anymore. And they don't have any peers.
Mm.
So Nexium guy, whatever his name is, he doesn't have a teacher and he has no peers. So nobody can tell him, hey man, check it out. Just let's slow this boat down a little bit. Or
Yeah.
I appreciate you sort of manifesting some kind of, you know, brilliance here, but you're getting these women to tattoo themselves on their inner thigh. It's not cool, man. Don't
Right.
do it.
Right.
Not cool. It's not cool. And you can't say to them, well, I've passed all feedback. So
Right.
at the point where somebody moves beyond feedback, they better be very realized.
Right. Right. It becomes an ego trip and it's very tantalizing. What's more tantalizing than going like, I can solve your problems. I have no problems. I mean, and sounds to me like Trungpa Rinpoche was able to get there and teach it without going nuts. I mean, is that a good definition of a?
I found him to be shockingly stable internally. The mental faculty was shocking. And you know, when I met him, he was only probably in his early 30s. I was in my early 20s.
Hmm.
He was a young man, but he had been trained from the age of 2 in a very strict tradition. So it's like somebody who learned the music very thoroughly. And I found him to be adventurous and kind of, we were looking for that kind of adventure then. We weren't looking for like a safe space. We were looking for, let's bust out here. So it fit the gestalt of the time. And then, but inside that, I found him to be like, you know, almost un, uh, unnervingly stable
Hmm.
and clear.
Hmm.
You know, and I consider myself a pretty good. And then here's the real kicker: I could ask him anything I wanted to. He never said don't ask. I asked him really tough stuff. I was
What
with
come?
him in tough. tough situation.
What comes
Well,
to mind?
I said, some of these, he uncovered a whole set of teachings called the Shambhala teachings, which I still think are a jewel and brilliant. I said, is this good, man? Is this going to really are people going to be able to work with this? It feels like, maybe it could turn into too much form and too little substance. And instead of being insulted, he just said, I really mean to do something well with this.
Hmm.
He just looked at like person to person at that point. It wasn't like, do what I say. So I encourage that with students. I say, you can ask anything. I'll listen to your point of view, your perspective. Hopefully we're mutually respectful for each other. Hopefully you respect something about experience and the depth of experience, because I think people don't value that enough these days.
Hmm.
So look, and I also say this is just my personal world. You don't come along if it's not interesting to you.
Hmm.
And there's so much of it that doesn't rely. I want to have this maybe be the final iteration. So much of the Buddhist teachings do not rely on the guru principle. That's Vajrayana only. And people should be clear about it. Hinayana is a preceptor, an elder, fine. The Mahayana is a mentor, or a kind of spiritual friend, life coach. And only if you're practicing Vajrayana style should you have a guru, and then you should have one.
Hmm.
So most people don't need that. They're not ready for that. They're not interested in that. And you should just say, here's how to meditate. Go do it for a month, and then we'll talk some more.
Right. Follow your breath and we'll talk in 30 days. What about your students who are following your path? Are they, I don't want to say claiming, that sounds like I'm doubting them. Do they say Trungpa Rinpoche disembodied as their guru, or are there other living gurus that people are going for?
Most of what happens under the banner of Dharma Moon is not specifically, explicitly Vajrayana teachings. So we're not using that model. We're using the model of, you can get somebody who actually knows how to practice and has some understanding of how the mind works. You can work with them in a traditional way. Or if you want a little bit of life coaching mixed in that, a one-to-one kind of thing, we train people up to a certain extent to do that. And if you do want to go study these kind of other implied aspects of the practice, there's access points. But I don't want Dharma Moon to become a lineage vehicle in that very strict way. It's very explicit.
Let me ask you, this has been wonderful. I do think we can bring it in for a landing, because every time I talk to you, it's thick.
I know, and we go for it. We roll.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Yeah. Meaning we don't have to push to 2 hours. My brain is already like, maybe you should just think about that gap thing again.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And I don't have to be your guru to mention it. You see what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, before I get to the last question, I did want to say about the gap thing. I remember in martial arts, somebody was saying a good teacher teaches you to notice that there are gaps in the frame rate of reality, and that's when you're supposed to move, and that's when that's how you can seem to like teleport or move beside them or trip them and all this stuff. So it was interesting. I know martial arts and spiritual philosophy has always been in bed together, but he was saying my teacher could wait for 5 people to be Mitch McConnell for 0.05% of a second and then move, and seem to have jumped 4 feet to the left. It just came to mind. It's just a fun thing.
No, it's a very fun thing. And here's the counterpoint. If you tune into this principle, I think you can notice in your interaction with people that there are these little short gaps in their thing.
Mm.
And you can actually see it.
Yeah.
You can see the cracks. And so it's not physically throwing them or anything like that, but you can engage into that spaciousness, even if it's not very wide. The uncertainty, the gap is a great place to allow for the conversation to expand, open up spontaneous, and it is the essence of comedy. Let's face it.
Right. Yeah. No, you're looking for a way to be ahead of them.
You want to, when people gap, they laugh.
Yeah, you gap them. You got to gap them.
them.
It's where you can put a crowbar in and kind of open it up a little bit more. But it's also where I'm sure we're going back to the abuse of it, like people that figure this out, but then use it to manipulate or to coerce, or it's death. Here's the question I have for you. And I'm also kind of prefacing it by saying, this is what I would want to ask Trungpa Rinpoche if I sat with him. I will ask you the same thing. which is there anything to worry about? Is there anything to worry about?
So we can go full circle. I would say absolutely the answer is no. On the Dundam level, there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
Relatively, definitely.
Yes.
And it's a healthy response to a moving game, Um, so I think to understand both of those concurrently is called the inseparability of the two truths, is very profound. And that's where I don't see too much of it. I think every road leads to the inseparability of the two truths. That's what I would say. If you follow any path, you'll get to that point at a certain point. So yeah, you should worry about hurting people. You should worry about deceiving yourself. You should worry about getting older, and you should take good care of yourself. You should worry about the health and well-being of your friends and people that you don't like. You should worry about your community. You should worry about your society. You should worry about history. You should worry about the world that your kids are going to grow up into.
And then at the same time,
what can you do ultimately?
Yeah. And at its core, everything is okay, I suppose. I know I'm not trying to make this a Super Soul Sunday moment. I'm just saying, like, my experience is in the quiet of the zero, in the past, no one's watching and no one's there to watch. It's a giggle that goes, what were you even worrying about?
I would say it differently.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're leaning a little towards the absolute truth there. Leaning a little bit.
Leaning.
I would say take the spice of the absolute truth and sprinkle it into the relative truth.
I like that.
Like salt, In other words, it's not wiping it out. It's not covering over a piece of meat with sauce and you can't even taste the meat anymore. You should have a good taste of the relative truth. It's where wisdom comes from. The relative truth has a lot to do with real wisdom. But you have some sense of that it's not fixed, it's not permanent, it's not independently existing. It doesn't exist on its own. It's all interactive. And it doesn't really have the kind of substance that we attribute to it. Even the most precious thing in it will shift and change in form. So take the absolute truth and see if you can have some time in your life where you can relax that way at a very vast level, and then sprinkle that into your day. Don't use it as a blanket, but use it as a spice.
I love that. I needed to hear that. That's a lesson I need all the time. Salt. Yeah, Joe, our editor, is going to say this guy was washed in white light. he's our video guy. David, thank you so much. Do a little plug for Dharma Moon in case people got the bug, the Buddhist bug, and they want to learn some of these practices that you've been talking about. Go a little bit deeper and explore that quiet, for not just the relative truth, but the absolute truth, but not just the absolute truth, the relative truth.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And, I would say probably the most, I think we'll be airing this sometime in September. And there's a couple of things. We have our sort of central program is called a mindfulness meditation teacher training program, 100-hour program. And your wife, Val, took it, which is so cool, that we have that connection. And it's a 5-weekend program, lasts over 4 months. And it's a really good training. It offers an initial weekend that you can just take and see if you like it. So that maybe we could put all that into the text accompanied with the links. Yeah. And that starts October 13th. Before that, we have an info session for that with your friend of mine, Duncan Trussell, is going to join me for an info session that's free. That's on September 26th. So if you go to dharmamoon.com, you will see all these things.
DHARMA. Dharma.
Yeah, DHARMA, which and Moon the usual way.
You should buy DARMA moon.com as well.
That's like
redirect it.
The new book Wisdom for Dummies.
Yeah.
But spell it WISDUM.
Perfect.
Yeah. So go to dharmamoon.com and maybe there'll be a couple links in there. And I just want to say that we're just trying to give people some basic training in meditation where you actually kind of get to know what you're doing.
Hmm.
I don't mean to say that other ones are not about that, but there's a clarity and a traditional sense of developing mindfulness meditation as the foundation, which is a very simple practice, a very straightforward practice. And it's just learning how to be present with what arises in a non-judgmental way.
Mm-hmm.
Opens up a lot of space, and it's for people who might want to learn that and stabilize it, but also offer it to other people. So we're training people how to teach. So that's what that is. Hopefully we can put the link in there and everybody will see it. And Pete, wow, man, I want to
Yeah.
give a little plug. I saw your act in New York at the City Winery. I was knocked out by it, man.
Oh, thank you.
Because we've been sort of episodically connecting at a pretty powerful level over a number of years now. And I thought, like, if you're out there, people, this is Pete talking and Pete philosophizing. There's some of that in the act, but there's also a kind of energy now that I didn't really tap into as much, where you're taking people on a ride energetically.
No.
And we really enjoyed it. So
I'm so glad. Well, the special, this episode's out in September, and the special will be out in October on Netflix. So it's coming around the bend. Yeah. Here in this truth, we're editing it tomorrow. But in the reality that this airs, it's almost out. So I'm glad.
Right. Well, what's the name of it?
It's called I Am Not For Everyone.
Huh.
There you go.
Well, I pity the fool that you're not for.
I know. But if you remember, it's a line in the act.
I know.
I am not for everyone. I also, you're a marketing guy. You have that wonderful book, Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck. So in the marketing of it, it's not to coerce people. I feel like my fans will watch it, but people who don't know who I am, it's itchy. Like, why is this guy saying I'm not for everyone? As opposed to like sunshine potato chip time. Who fucking cares? A guy that says this isn't for everybody, it makes you go like, it's the Pepsi challenge. Which one's Coke? Like it's individualized. Are you for me? Am I for you? It makes it more engaging.
Yeah, they do it. The market, like they'll have somebody in a bar who's on the marketing team, and they're just supposed to talk to the person next to them and say, "Oh, I'm into this thing." It's just for the person next to you.
Yep, that's right.
And what's up? Well, very cool. And while you're mentioning that, I think you and I are both on the same track, which has brought us sort of strongly together, of being creative people. Everybody knows I'm a musician and a composer, and I, produce Krishna Das records and play guitar for all kinds of people, and etc. But I've always wanted to weave those three things together: creativity, spirituality, and making a buck. So if you don't come to any of our trainings or classes or anything like that,
check out the book.
Check out the book. And I think it's in sync with the kind of conversations we have, are always weaving their way through those topics.
And you've always, I'm happy to say, I know I love you, and I don't have to. It's not news to you, which is wonderful, because people should know. In fact, I had an English teacher that said you should say you love me, like tell people you love me, like that's better than saying I love you. It's going like, I can tell you love me, and I can tell you love me, but like I've turned to you always in the spiritual thing, going like, what is this? We're having these conversations, and last night I was screaming about diarrhea, and like, it's wonderful to just go like, it's all holding hands and it's all together. And that's so refreshing from, the type of spirituality I was raised in was all about being polite and nice and decent and wear a suit and have a haircut. And I'm like, fuck that shit.
Wow.
I do want to say Mulaney is one of my absolute favorites. And also, Mulaney is not a clean comic. So what my dad thinks John Mulaney is not. And I have nothing but love for John. I think everybody knows that. I'm just saying, I'm not going for the polite thing.
Yeah, it's there's something prismatic in the whole thing, Pete. That's really, like, if you can see the whole picture of your dad, John Mulaney, you, me, Leela, Val, Ramdas, there's some world in which that's all a big giant prism of interactivity, and it is beautiful.
I agree. I agree.
Stunning, actually.
Before you said it, I was like, that is so funny. You just gave me like an outside of myself perspective, hearing all those names and thinking my play in that. I'm like, this really is pretty funny. All of it. And pretty beautiful. So thank you for reminding us.
Are we ready to start recording the podcast now? We never had a beginning.
I welcomed you. I said
We
welcome.
just started talking.
Yeah. Sorry, buddy. It's
Yeah.
all going live.
Like the old Jewish guy who just wandered onto the set, you know?
That's it. That's all we needed. And you were ready to go. Well, if you remember, we end the show with you saying keep it crispy. If you this is your second time on, so you this is your second keep it crispy. Would you say keep it crispy? And then we'll be done here.
I would say keep on keeping it crispy, everybody. Keep on keeping it crispy.
Assuming they already have been keeping it crispy. I like that.
I'm assuming they have had some introduction. Now you're in
Just
the middle of the marathon. You're getting a little tired. Keep on keeping it crispy.
Yeah, you're in maintenance. Keep it. Thank you, David.